Hey Jaguars, this is Gianna Cervantes coming to you from Dr. Rose Pike's office to ask her a few questions. Thank you, Dr. Pike, for taking some time out of your busy schedule of being our vice principal in order to do this interview with me.
It is my pleasure, thank you.
Dr. Pike, who or what inspired you to become a vice principal?
I think I've been inspired by a lot of people, especially just to get to be a teacher. I was inspired by all the lovely, wonderful, helpful teachers that I had growing up. School was always my safe place, the place where I felt most happy and welcomed. I never knew I wanted to be a vice principal, but I think just with having really great leadership role models, like I had worked for a director named Tracy Chambers who made her job seem so effortless. But I knew she worked really hard at what she did, and so I was inspired by seeing another woman in a leadership position, and I thought, well, maybe I can do that. So when the opportunity presented itself, I went ahead and applied, and here I am, and I'm very grateful.
Along your journey of becoming a vice principal, what challenges or obstacles did you have to overcome in order to achieve your goal?
I had to overcome what I call head noise, when you kind of try to talk yourself out of something because you're scared. I didn't know that I could be a disciplinarian, so I was afraid of disciplining kids. I was afraid of, what do I do to suspend a kid, or is that the right thing to do? What if I have upset parents or upset community members? What if teachers don't like me? All of those silly things that we do to ourselves when we're afraid of trying something new. So I had to overcome that. But luckily I have a really supportive family. Like my husband always told me, you can do it, you'll be fine, you're ready for this. I was a teacher for over 15 years in the classroom, and so I thought, well, maybe I am ready to do something different. So I had to overcome that, and then of course school, right? Because you have to take classes. Every time you want to move up, you have to take classes to show that you're ready and that you've learned enough to do that new position. So school wasn't an obstacle, but it's always a challenge to try something new.
With the bullying epidemic on the rise, what steps have you taken to make our students feel safe to come forward in such a situation?
So I like to, I like to walk through classrooms and get to know students. I like to be on the playground and get to know students. And I like to talk to students when I see any kind of disagreement going on, or actually I just like to prevent things. So I've made it very clear. I walk around and tell classrooms full of students that, we're a family here at Jacob Wiens, that we often spend more time with each other than we do with our own families at home. And that as, brothers and sisters sometimes do. I don't know if you have a brother or a sister, but sometimes, we get into arguments with them, and we feel like we can push them around, or we get pushed around by them. But at the end of the day, if anybody messed with our brother or sister, we would have a really hard time with that, right? We would step up and defend them. So I feel that that's kind of the mentality that we need to have here, is that we take care of each other. And so, yeah, we might have little disagreements, and yes, we might, joke around, maybe sometimes cross the line in playing rough, but we always have to come back. So we have to keep in mind that playing rough is not okay, but we have to come back and say, wait a minute, you're like my sister, or you're like my brother, and nobody's going to mess with you. So I'm going to speak highly of you. I'm going to protect you because we're family here. And so I think that mentality has helped students take care of each other and see each other as siblings. And so we can kind of sometimes do something with each other and maybe make each other upset, joke around, but at the end of the day, we have to come back and say, well, I'm really sorry, I was really just joking, I won't do that anymore, and move forward.
What precautions have you as a vice principal taken to ensure our safety of any situation?
So one thing that I like to do is I like to make sure, again, that I know all students on campus. I do my best to get to know all students on campus, but I always make sure that I walk outside. So Mrs. Matze and I, Mrs. Matze is a really great role model for me, and she's taught me to be visible to the community, be visible to our parents. So I'm sure you've seen Mrs. Matze. She grabs that stop sign every day, and she goes out and does, crossing duty or whatever needs to be done. And so I take after her, and I do the same thing, but I also make sure that I greet parents every day, that I say good morning, good afternoon in English and in Spanish, that I'm aware of what the familiar faces should be. so that if I see someone that is not familiar on our campus, I can approach that person, introduce myself, and ask them what they're doing here, why they're here, how I can help them. I think that that is a really great preventative measure to make sure that the community knows that we know them, they know us, and if anything doesn't look right, if we have people here that shouldn't be here, that we're going to make sure that we take care of that situation so that we can be safe. And then we also, at this school, we are very, very good about noticing, are there police cars driving by? Well, why are they driving by? Is there a helicopter overhead? Well, why is it overhead? And so we communicate with the police department, the sheriff's department, the ambulance company, the fire company, and we make sure that we know what's going on in our community so that if we need to provide a safety measure like a lockdown or like a shelter in place, that we do that immediately. Even if there's no immediate threat, that we do that so that we protect our staff and our students.
If you could create a perfect space for students to learn in the most enjoyable environment as possible, what would it look like?
Oh my goodness. It would look like, it would look like a loud classroom, believe it or not. I know that sounds silly, and I know that that's probably not what you're used to. But, and when I say a loud classroom, I mean kids talking about content, kids talking about reading, kids talking about math, kids talking about science, kids talking about social studies, kids talking about health, and all of those things. It would be more kids talking about what they're learning, working together. I think that the classroom might look as, also like kids working on the floor together, doing a project. I know that one of my most memorable experiences growing up was when I had a second grade teacher who used to read to us C.S. Lewis books like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and she would put down a map of Narnia. And as she read the books in the series, she would tell us where we were traveling on that map, and all the children would gather around and look at the map and interact with it. We would draw pictures about it, but it had really seriously high vocabulary. But we all learned the vocabulary because we were so excited about the story. And you can't understand the story if you don't understand the vocabulary. So there was a lot of structured time, too, where we did our work and we looked up definitions and we talked about the words in the sentences. But we spent a lot of time hands-on. And I think that that would be the ideal situation for students to learn in and be happy learning. So there has to be the right balance of hands-on and structured time where the teacher is teaching.
I think that's really cool how, the teacher did all that with you guys.
Thanks. It was. It's a great memory.
Who was your favorite elementary school teacher, and how did they stand out to you?
That's the one. So my favorite elementary school teacher, her name was Marguerite Navarrete. She was my second grade teacher and my third grade teacher. And she stood out to me because she challenged us. So in second and third grade, we were reading, like I said, C.S. Lewis books. She also read and taught us Shakespeare, which is something that usually you don't learn until you're in middle school or actually high school, and there's college classes on Shakespeare. She taught us Shakespeare, and she believed that we would be able to learn it, that we had the capacity to learn it. So she spent a lot of time, again, teaching us vocabulary because Shakespeare is written in very old English. And so for us, second graders, we were kind of like, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? So we did a lot of lessons on dissecting paragraphs or parts of what we were reading, even at a second grade level. And so although it was a high reading level, the way that she interacted with us, the way that she made us interact with the content, the way that she brought it to life with pictures and with acting it out, all of that helped us to understand it. So even, again, second and third grade, by the time I was done with those classes, I knew a lot about Shakespeare. So much that she even got us to go on a show called Two on the Town in LA, and so they were so impressed with what we were doing at the school that this television show came and filmed us. So super exciting. And she was beautiful too. So I just kind of watched her float across the room, and it was a really great experience to have learned so much from a person that was lovely on the inside and the outside. So she inspired me.
It seems like a good experience.
It was great.
Can you describe to us your favorite fourth grade memory?
Fourth grade, I can tell you I had Mrs. Shapiro. And my favorite fourth grade memory is that I was not a great reader. I could read anything that was put in front of me, but I didn't understand what I was reading. I'm a second language learner, so Spanish is my first language and English is my second language. So I don't know if it had anything to do with that. I just know that Ms. Shapiro took the time to sit with me and help me understand what I was reading and tell me, slow down, don't read so fast. What are you reading about? What did you just read? Tell me about it. So I got to the point where I felt a lot more comfortable going to the library and checking out chapter books and things, because I finally felt like I could read a book and enjoy it and actually understand it, rather than just read words on a page and finish it and put it away and not really know what I had read. So she was a very helpful teacher, and I appreciated the time that she spent with me. And I remember sitting with her with a book. I can't remember the book title, but I remember it was a chapter book. I remember it was like a yellow cover, and I remember her sitting with me and helping me read that and understand it, and that was great.
Nelson Mandela once said, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." How has education allowed you to change the world?
Oh my goodness, that is a deep question. I think I do my part to change the world because I'm an educator, and because teaching and learning is part of what makes humanity great. The fact that we can take information and do something with it, and continuously learn and build on what we know, and that we can analyze things at a very high level and create and invent and motivate others. So I think that I've done my part in that I became a teacher, and that I love learning. I learned along with my kids a lot of the times. I was teaching stuff, and I would get excited, and they would laugh at me thinking I was a little goofy. But I think that when you are educated, and it's not always, at least culturally, in my Mexican culture, we say educación, and educación has a lot to do with manners, more so than it has to do with formal education. But I think that by being an educated person, you learn about the world, and you learn about how things are not always, black and white. There's a lot of gray in between. So when you become an educated adult, you are able to make better decisions. You are able to contribute to society, and by doing that, you become better for humanity. So I agree with Nelson Mandela that if you have education, you can impact the world because you have all of this knowledge that will allow you to make better choices, that will allow you to, again, make choices that would better humanity, that would improve any kind of condition, because you have the ability to analyze and to take in what the situation is and to make informed decisions from a lot of perspectives.
Is there anything else you would like to add or let people know about yourself?
I would like people to know that I love being at Jacob Wiens, that I feel very blessed, that I feel very excited about being here. My parents moved from Orange County here to Hemet in, I think it was 1990, and I went to West Valley High School, which was, where this school was our field. And so I'm used to this community. I grew up in this community, from high school forward. And so I'm really happy to be back in this specific part of town. I'm really excited to be at Jacob Wiens. Students here, like yourself, are wonderful. The teachers are wonderful. The families are great. And so I just want to do a good job for all of you. So that's my main goal, is to do a good job for you. And I think that would help me feel like I've done my part. So I'm excited to be here, and I thank you.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Well done.